Krylos 7 was not a place anyone would call home unless they had no other choice. It was a barren wasteland, its surface cracked and dry under the glare of two suns that never seemed to set. The air shimmered with heat, and the only signs of life were the hulking mining rigs scattered across the horizon like forgotten relics. Jace Venn knew this planet better than he cared to admit. For years, he had lived in solitude, fixing broken machinery for the miners who came and went without so much as a thank you. His workshop, a ramshackle collection of scrap metal and salvaged parts, was the closest thing he had to a sanctuary. Jace wasn't much for conversation. He preferred the rhythmic clinking of tools against metal, the low hum of engines coming back to life, and the quiet satisfaction of solving problems others deemed unsolvable. But on this particular day, something unusual interrupted his routine. A streak of light tore across the sky, leaving a trail of fire behind it before disappearing, beyond the jagged cliffs that bordered his territory. At first, Jace thought it was just another meteorite crashing into the endless desert. Such things happened often enough here. Krylos 7's thin atmosphere made it an easy target for space debris. But when the ground trembled moments later, shaking loose dust from the rafters of his workshop, curiosity got the better of him. Capre. His toolkit and a pair of goggles, he climbed onto his battered hoverbike and sped toward the source of the disturbance. The crash site was farther away than he expected, nestled deep within a rocky canyon where shadows pooled thickly despite the harsh sunlight above. As Jace approached, his bike skidded to a halt. Before him lay what could only be described as a ship, but unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its sleek design curved gracefully, almost organic in appearance, with faint veins of glowing blue light pulsing beneath its translucent hull. Smoke curled lazily from one side and chunks of molten rock were embedded in its surface, evidence of its violent descent. Jace dismounted cautiously, his boots crunching against the gravel. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. No response came, but then he noticed movement near the wreckage. A figure emerged slowly, limping slightly, their form illuminated by the dim glow emanating from the ship. At first glance, they appeared human, or at least humanoid, but as they stepped closer, Jace realized they were anything but. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, catching the light in ways that made her seem ethereal. Her eyes were large and almond-shaped, glowing softly with an inner luminescence. Long flowing hair cascaded down her back, shifting colors like oil on water. She wore a fitted suit that seemed to meld seamlessly with her body, its material rippling faintly as though alive. Despite her otherworldly appearance, there was something undeniably fragile about her, as if she were holding herself together by sheer willpower. "Are you okay?" Jace asked hesitantly, unsure whether she even understood his language. To his surprise, she nodded weakly and spoke in halting, accented words. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice melodic yet strained. "My ship, damaged." Jace blinked, taken aback. Not only did she speak his language, but she also sounded eerily calm given the circumstances. Still, he couldn't ignore the obvious. She needed help. Setting aside his initial shock, he gestured toward his bike. "Come on. My workshop isn't far. I can take a look at your ship once we get you somewhere safe." Lyra hesitated, glancing back at the wreckage with an expression that hinted at both relief and reluctance. Finally, she nodded again and allowed him to guide her to the hoverbike. Climbing aboard proved awkward for her movement stiff and unfamiliar, but Jace steadied the vehicle as best he could before revving the engine and speeding back toward his workshop. The ride was silent save for the roar of the wind whipping past them. Jace stole occasional glances at Lyra over his shoulder, trying to reconcile what he was seeing with everything he thought he knew about the universe. Aliens weren't unheard of course, not in this age of interstellar travel, but encountering one personally was another matter entirely. And this alien, she didn't feel dangerous. If anything, she radiated vulnerability, as though carrying some great burden she couldn't share. By the time they reached the workshop, the suns were beginning their slow descent, casting long shadows across the landscape. Jace parked the bike outside and ushered Lyra inside, where the cool shade offered a reprieve from the oppressive heat. He motioned for her to sit on a stool while he rummaged through his supplies, pulling out a canteen of water and a basic med kit. "Here," he said, handing her the water. "Drink this. You look like you've been through hell." Lyra accepted the canteen with delicate hands, her fingers brushing briefly against his. The contact sent a strange tingle up his arm, but he dismissed it as static electricity or exhaustion. Watching her sip cautiously, he decided to press for answers. "So," he began, leaning against a workbench, "what exactly are you doing out here? This isn't exactly a tourist destination." Lyra lowered the canteen and met his gaze. There was a flicker of hesitation in her luminous eyes, but then she spoke, her tone measured. "I was fleeing from my people. They do not approve of certain choices I have made." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Choices?" She nodded, though she didn't elaborate further. Instead, she turned the conversation back to him. "You helped me. Why?" He shrugged, caught off guard by the question. "I don't know. Seemed like the right thing to do. Besides, I fix stuff. It's what I do." A small smile touched her lips, fleeting but genuine. "Then perhaps you are more remarkable than you realize." Before Jace could respond, a loud groan echoed from outside. Both of them froze, turning toward the sound. Through the open doorway, they could see smoke rising steadily from the direction of the crash site. The ship's systems must still be active, Jace thought grimly. If they didn't address the damage soon, the whole thing might explode, or worse, attract unwanted attention. "We should go back," Lyra said quietly, standing up. "There is much to repair, and little time." Jace sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Helping her was already proving to be more complicated than he'd anticipated. But something about her, the way she carried herself, the weight of unspoken truths in her words made it impossible to turn her away. "All right," he said finally, grabbing his toolkit. "Let's see what we're dealing with." As they headed back toward the crash site, neither of them noticed the faint shimmer in the air around them, like threads weaving invisibly between their hearts. Whatever bond had begun forming that day would change their lives forever. But for now, all Jace could think about was fixing a broken ship and keeping its mysterious pilot alive. The journey back to the crash site was tense, though neither Jace nor Lyra spoke much. The suns were sinking lower now, casting long shadows across the cracked earth and bathing the canyon in hues of orange and red. Jace kept glancing at Lyra as they rode, trying to piece together the fragments of information she'd shared earlier. Fleeing her people. Certain choices. It all sounded vague, almost cryptic. But there was no denying the urgency in her voice, or the way she seemed to carry herself with a quiet strength, despite her obvious exhaustion. When they arrived, the ship looked even worse than before. Smoke billowed from several cracks in its hull, and sparks occasionally shot out from exposed panels. The glowing veins beneath its translucent surface flickered erratically, like a heartbeat struggling to maintain rhythm. Jace dismounted his hoverbike and approached cautiously, his toolkit already in hand. Lyra followed closely behind him, her movements graceful yet deliberate. "All right," Jace said, crouching near one of the damaged sections. "Let's see what we're working with here." He ran his fingers along the edges of a jagged fracture, frowning when he felt heat radiating from the material. "This isn't standard alloy. What is this thing made of?" Lyra knelt beside him, her silver skin catching the fading sunlight. "It is biometal, grown, not forged." Jace blinked, looking at her skeptically. "Grown? You mean it's alive?" "In a way," she replied softly. "Our ships are extensions of ourselves. They adapt, heal, but they require care." Let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "Well, that explains why I've never seen anything like it. Guess I'll have to wing it." For the next few hours, Jace worked tirelessly, his hands moving with practiced precision as he patched up the worst of the damage. Lyra stayed by his side, offering occasional guidance when he encountered something unfamiliar. She explained how certain systems functioned and warned him away from areas that might still be unstable. Despite their differences, they fell into an easy rhythm, each focused on the task at hand. As night began to fall, the twin suns finally dipped below the horizon, plunging the canyon into darkness. Jace activated the portable lights mounted on his toolkit, their soft glow illuminating the work area. The silence between them grew heavier, broken only by the occasional clink of tools or the hum of the ship's struggling systems. "You know," Jace said after a while, wiping sweat from his brow, "you haven't told me much about yourself, like, where exactly are you from, and who are these people you mentioned earlier?" Lyra hesitated, her luminous eyes reflecting the light from his tools. "I am Luminae," she said simply. "My kind live among the stars, far beyond your reach. We are different, advanced, but also bound by ancient laws." Jace nodded slowly, piecing together what little she offered. "And these laws, they're why you're running?" She looked away, her expression unreadable. "Yes. My actions have brought shame upon my family. To leave was the only choice." Her words carried a weight that made Jace uncomfortable. There was more to her story, he could tell, but pressing further felt intrusive. Instead, he changed the subject. "So what happens if I fix this ship? Do you just take off and leave me here?" Lyra met his gaze again, her eyes softening. "If you repair my vessel, I will owe you a debt greater than you can imagine." "A debt?" Jace chuckled nervously. "Look, I don't need payment, just doing my job." "It is not payment I speak of," she said firmly. "Among my kind, saving another's life creates a bond, a connection deeper than words can describe. You would become part of my soul thread." Jace froze, staring at her. "Wait, what? A bond? That sounds intense." "It is natural for us," Lyra explained, "but humans may find it overwhelming." Overwhelming was an understatement. Jace stood up, pacing a few steps away from the ship. The idea of being tied to someone, or something, forever, wasn't exactly appealing. He had spent years building walls around himself, keeping others at arm's length. Now some alien girl was telling him he'd inadvertently signed up for an eternal cosmic link. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath. Turning back to Lyra, he added, "Look, I'm just trying to help. I didn't ask for any of this bond nonsense." Lyra tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made him uneasy. "You misunderstand. This bond is not forced. It grows naturally. Whether you accept it or not, it has already begun." Jace opened his mouth to argue but stopped short when he noticed something strange. Shadows around the ship seemed to shift unnaturally, twisting and curling as though alive. His tools vibrated faintly in his hands, and a sudden chill ran down his spine. Shaking his head, he dismissed it as fatigue playing tricks on him. "Whatever," he said gruffly, returning to his work. "Let's just focus on getting your ship fixed." Lyra watched him silently for a moment before nodding. "Very well." The rest of the night passed in relative silence, save for the rhythmic tapping of Jace's tools against the biometal. By dawn, he had managed to stabilize the most critical systems, though the ship was far from fully operational. Exhausted, he slumped onto the ground, leaning against the cool metal of the hull. "Think it'll hold long enough to get us somewhere safe?" he asked, rubbing his temples. "For now," Lyra replied, sitting beside him. "But we must act quickly. My people may already be searching for me." Jace groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Great. Just what I needed. Intergalactic bounty hunters breathing down my neck." "They are not bounty hunters," Lyra corrected gently. "They are enforcers, ruthless and efficient. If they find us, escape will be difficult." "Well, thanks for the pep talk," Jace muttered sarcastically. He sighed heavily, letting his head fall back against the ship. "Why does this always happen to me?" Lyra smiled faintly, her gaze drifting toward the horizon where the first rays of sunlight were beginning to peek over the cliffs. "Perhaps fate has chosen you for a reason." "Fate doesn't exist," Jace snapped. perhaps a little too sharply. Things just happen. People make choices. That's it. Lyra didn't respond immediately, her expression thoughtful. After a moment, she reached out and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. Her touch sent a jolt through him, not painful but startlingly electric. He flinched, pulling away instinctively. "What was that?" he demanded, rubbing his arm. "I apologize," she said quietly. "The bond is strengthening. You feel it too, do you not?" Jace stared at her, unsure how to respond. In truth, he had been feeling odd sensations lately, tingling in his fingertips, vivid dreams of starlit skies, moments where the air around him seemed charged with energy. He hadn't wanted to acknowledge them, chalking them up to stress or lack of sleep. But now, faced with Lyra's calm certainty, denial felt futile. "Yeah," he admitted reluctantly. "I feel it." Her smile returned, warmer this time. "Then perhaps you are ready to embrace it." "Embrace what exactly?" Jace asked warily. "Being dragged into some alien drama I didn't sign up for?" "No," Lyra said softly. "Embracing the possibility that not everything in this universe can be fixed with tools and logic." Before Jace could reply, a distant rumble echoed through the canyon. Both of them turned toward the sound, their eyes widening as specks of light appeared on the horizon, ships descending rapidly from the sky. Lyra's face paled, her composure faltering for the first time. "They have found us," she whispered. Jace clenched his fists, adrenaline surging through him. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. His quiet life on Krilo 7 was over. The rumbling grew louder, reverberating through the canyon like an approaching storm. Jace and Lyra stood frozen for a moment, staring at the distant lights cutting through the early morning sky. Ships, too many to count, descended in formation, their sleek black hulls glinting ominously as they closed in on their position. "We need to move," Jace said sharply, grabbing his toolkit and shoving it into a satchel slung over his shoulder. His mind raced, trying to calculate their chances of escape. The ship was barely functional, and even if they managed to get it airborne, those vessels would outrun them in seconds. Still, standing around wasn't an option. Lyra nodded grimly, her luminous eyes darting between the incoming ships and the damaged vessel behind them. "They are enforcers," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "If they capture me, or you..." She trailed off, but Jace didn't need her to finish. Whatever fate awaited them at the hands of these enforcers, it wouldn't be pleasant. He clenched his jaw, determination overriding panic. "All right, here's what we're gonna do. I'll power up the ship while you guide me through anything critical I might miss. We won't have much time, so we'll need to act fast." Without waiting for her response, Jace sprinted toward the ship, climbing inside through one of the jagged openings he'd patched earlier. The interior was dimly lit, its walls pulsating faintly with the same biometal material that made up the exterior. Strange symbols flickered across panels embedded in the floor and ceiling, glowing brighter as Lyra stepped in after him. "This console controls primary systems," she instructed quickly, pointing to a circular panel near the front. "Focus on stabilizing the core first. It's still unstable from the crash." Jace knelt beside the panel, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar interface. To his surprise, the symbols shifted and rearranged themselves as he touched them, adapting to his movements like the ship was learning from him. It was disorienting but oddly intuitive, as though the vessel itself was guiding him along. "Core temperature rising," Lyra warned, her voice tense. "You must balance the energy flow before it overheats." Sweat dripped down Jace's forehead as he worked, muttering under his breath. "Got it. Got it." He adjusted several settings, watching anxiously as the glowing veins within the ship began to stabilize. The hum of the engines grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath him. For a brief moment, hope flared in his chest. They might actually make it out of this alive. But then, a sharp crackle echoed through the air, followed by a blinding flash of light outside. Both Jace and Lyra turned just in time to see one of the enforcer ships land heavily near the crash site, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Figures clad in dark armor poured out, weapons drawn and aimed directly at the ship. They've surrounded us, Lyra breathed, gripping the edge of a nearby console. Her silver skin shimmered faintly, betraying her anxiety. We cannot fight them, not like this. Jace gritted his teeth, scanning the scene outside. The enforcers moved with precision, spreading out in a wide arc to cut off any possible escape routes. Their leader, a towering figure with a mask resembling a jagged crescent moon, stepped forward, raising a hand to signal his team to hold fire. For now, Lyra, the figure called, his voice amplified and distorted by his helmet. Come out. Resistance is futile. Jace glanced at Lyra, who looked torn between defiance and resignation. Do you know him? He asked quietly. He is Commander Vale, she replied, her tone bitter. One of the most ruthless enforcers in my people's fleet. He will not hesitate to destroy everything in his path to bring me back. Well, we're not giving up yet, Jace snapped, more to himself than to her. Turning back to the console, he focused all his attention on powering up the ship's thrusters. Just give me a minute. If we can get airborne, maybe we can lose them in the atmosphere. Lyra hesitated, then moved to assist him, her hands hovering over another set of controls. Together they worked frantically, synchronizing their efforts despite the chaos unfolding outside. Slowly but surely, the ship began to hum with renewed energy, its veins glowing brighter and steadier. As they labored, Jace's curiosity got the better of him. Why are they so desperate to catch you? What did you do that's got them hunting you down like this? Lyra paused, her expression pained. It is not what I do. She admitted softly. It is what I discovered. My people, we are not as benevolent as we claim. Our technology, our abilities, they come at a cost hidden from outsiders. What kind of cost? Jace pressed, his brow furrowed. Before, she could answer. The ship shuddered violently as something struck its hull. Sparks flew from the damaged sections and alarms blared throughout the cabin. Outside, the enforcers had begun firing, their weapons emitting high-pitched whines as bolts of energy slammed into the biometal. They're attacking, Jace shouted, scrambling to shield himself from falling debris. We don't have much time. I know, Lyra yelled back, her composure cracking under the strain. She tapped furiously at the console, her movements frantic. Thrusters are almost online, hold on. Another blast rocked the ship, sending both of them sprawling to the floor. Jace groaned, pushing himself up and crawling back to the controls. His vision blurred momentarily, but he forced himself to focus. Through sheer willpower, he managed to activate the final sequence, and with a deafening roar, the ship lurched upward, its engines igniting in a brilliant burst of blue light. The sudden acceleration threw Jace backward, slamming him against the wall. Pain shot through his ribs, but he ignored it, dragging himself to his feet as the ship broke free of the planet's gravity. Below them, Krilo 7 shrank rapidly, its barren landscape fading into insignificance. For a few precious moments, it seemed like they might actually escape, but then warning alerts flashed across the console, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of pursuing ships closing in. They're following us, Lyra exclaimed, her hands flying over the controls as she attempted evasive maneuvers. The ship swerved sharply, throwing Jace off balance again. He grabbed onto a nearby railing, clinging tightly as stars streaked past the windows. How long can this thing hold out? He demanded, shouting to be heard over the cacophony of alarms and engine noise. Not long enough, Lyra replied, grimly. We need somewhere to hide, but there's nothing nearby. Jace cursed under his breath, his mind racing. Then inspiration struck. Wait. Back on Krilo 7, I noticed some old mining tunnels leading deep underground. If we can circle back without getting blown apart, maybe we can use them to shake these guys. It's risky, Lyra said, her eyes narrowing as she considered the plan. But it may be our only chance. With no other options, she adjusted their course, angling the ship back toward the planet's surface. As they descended, the enforcers followed relentlessly, their weapons lighting up the void around them. Every second felt like an eternity, each impact threatening to tear the fragile vessel apart. Finally, they reached the canyon where the crash had occurred, Lyra guided the ship into one of the larger tunnels, its narrow passage forcing the enforcers to hang back. Darkness enveloped them as they plunged deeper underground, the only illumination coming from the faint glow of the ship's vanes. When they emerged on the other side of the tunnel network, the enforcers were nowhere to be seen. For now, they were safe, or as safe as two fugitives could be in the middle of hostile territory. Breathing heavily, Jace collapsed into a seat, his body trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. "That was insane," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "What happens now?" Lyra sank into the seat beside him, her shoulders sagging with relief. "Now, we prepare for what comes next. Because this is far from over." As the ship drifted silently through space, neither of them noticed the faint threads of light weaving invisibly between them, growing stronger with every passing moment. The silence inside the ship was deafening. After narrowly escaping the enforcers, Jace and Lyra found themselves adrift in the vast emptiness of space, their damaged vessel limping along like a wounded animal. The biometal walls of the ship pulsed faintly, their glow dimmer than before, as though even the vessel itself was struggling to recover from the ordeal. Jace slumped in his seat, staring out at the endless expanse of stars, while Lyra sat beside him, her silver skin reflecting the soft light of the console. "We need to talk," Jace said finally, breaking the tense quiet that had settled between them. His voice was calm but firm, betraying none of the unease churning within him. "You mentioned secrets about your people earlier, things they're hiding. What exactly are we dealing with here?" Lyra hesitated, her luminous eyes flickering toward him before dropping to her lap. For a moment she seemed lost in thought, weighing whether or not to trust him completely. Finally she sighed softly and began to speak. "My people, the Luminae, are known across the galaxy for our advanced technology and harmonious ways," she explained, her tone measured yet tinged with sadness. "But this image, it is a lie. Our abilities, the biometal ships, the energy manipulation, it all comes at a cost. To sustain ourselves, we must harvest energy from other beings. Life force, if you will." Jace frowned, leaning forward in his seat. "Wait, you mean you take energy from living creatures, like drain them?" "It is more complex than that," Lyra replied quickly, sensing his growing unease. "We do not kill outright, at least not always. Instead, we form bonds with others, drawing small amounts of their vitality over time. It is why my kind values connection so deeply. Without them, we cannot survive." Jace rubbed his temples, trying to process what she was saying. "So this soul thread thing, it's not just some cosmic bond. It's literally keeping you alive?" "Yes," Lyra admitted quietly. "And now, because of me, you are part of it." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had suspected there was more to their connection than simple gratitude, but hearing it confirmed made his stomach churn. Was he unknowingly feeding her somehow? Would it eventually harm him? The questions swirled in his mind, each one darker than the last. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice sharper than intended. "If I'm tied to you now, don't I deserve to know what I'm getting into?" "I wanted to protect you," Lyra said earnestly, her eyes pleading. "I thought perhaps I could sever the thread before it grew too strong, but now—" She trailed off, glancing down at her hands. "It is too late. You feel it too, do you not? The pull between us?" Jace couldn't deny it. Over the past few days, the sensations had grown stronger, tingling warmth whenever she was near, vivid dreams of starlit skies, even flashes of emotions that weren't entirely his own. At first he'd dismissed them as stress or exhaustion, but now he understood they were something far more profound, something permanent. Before he could respond, an alarm blared suddenly, startling both of them. Jace bolted upright, scanning the console for the source of the disturbance. Outside the ship's windows, several black shapes emerged from the void, closing in rapidly. The enforcers had found them again. "They tracked us," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "They never give up." Jace clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. How are they even doing that? We went through those tunnels specifically to lose them. It's the bond, Lyra said grimly. Their technology can detect soul threads. As long as we remain connected, they will always find us. Well, that's just great, Jace muttered sarcastically. Any bright ideas on how to break it? Lyra shook her head, her expression pained. Severing a thread is dangerous for both parties. Without proper guidance, it could destroy us both. Fantastic, Jace snapped. So we're stuck, playing hide-and-seek with intergalactic bounty hunters until they catch us and drag us back to your homeworld. Is that the plan? There may be another way, Lyra said hesitantly. There is a place, a lawless trading outpost called Nexus Prime. It is far enough from Luminite territory that the enforcers would hesitate to attack openly, and there is someone there who might be able to help us. Help us how? Jace demanded. Fix the ship? Sever the bond? Or maybe just hand us over to your people? He is a rogue scientist, Lyra explained. Once a member of the Lumini Council, but he fled after uncovering the truth about our methods. If anyone knows how to undo a soul thread safely, it is him. Jace stared at her, torn between skepticism and desperation. The idea of seeking help from a shady scientist on a lawless station sounded like a recipe for disaster, but with the enforcers bearing down on them and no other options in sight, it was the only chance they had. All right, he said finally, gripping the console tightly. Set a course for this Nexus Prime. Let's hope your guy knows what he's doing. Lyra nodded, her fingers flying over the controls as she plotted a new trajectory. The ship shuddered slightly as its engines roared to life, accelerating away from the pursuing vessels. Behind them, the enforcers gave chase, their weapons firing bolts of energy that streaked past the ship like angry comets. As they raced through the void, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that they were running toward something just as dangerous as the hunters behind them. Nexus Prime wasn't exactly known for its hospitality. Stories of pirates, smugglers, and worse filled the galactic grapevine. Still, desperate times called for desperate measures. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional jolt as the ship narrowly avoided enemy fire. Lyra remained focused on navigating, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the cabin. Jace watched her from the corner of his eye, his thoughts swirling with conflicting emotions. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the strange bond pulling at his chest, he couldn't bring himself to regret helping her. There was something about Lyra, something pure and unyielding that made him want to fight for her, even if it meant risking everything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a massive structure loomed into view ahead of them. Nexus Prime was unlike anything Jace had ever seen. A sprawling labyrinth of metal and glass suspended in the void, its surface crawling with ships of every shape and size. Lights blinked chaotically across its exterior, and the hum of countless engines filled the air as they approached. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice tinged with both relief and apprehension. "Let's hope we're not too late." As they docked at the station, Jace grabbed his toolkit and slung it over his shoulder, ready for whatever awaited them inside. Together, he and Lyra stepped out of the ship, their footsteps echoing against the cold metal floor of the hangar. Around them, aliens of all species bustled about, their conversations overlapping in a cacophony of languages. Somewhere in this chaotic maze lived the man who might hold the key to their survival, or seal their doom. "Which way?" Jace asked, scanning the crowd. Lyra pointed toward a narrow corridor leading deeper into the station. "Follow me." With the enforcers still hot on their trail and no guarantee of success, they ventured into the heart of Nexus Prime, unaware of the dangers lurking in its shadowy corners, or the choices that lay ahead. The deeper they ventured into Nexus Prime, the more chaotic and suffocating the atmosphere became. The station was a sprawling maze of neon-lit corridors, crowded markets, and shadowy alcoves where unsavory deals were struck in hushed tones. The air smelled faintly of oil and burnt circuits mingling with the acrid tang of alien spices wafting from food stalls. Jace kept his hand near the makeshift plasma cutter strapped to his belt, a precaution he'd taken after spotting several glares from suspicious-looking patrons. Lyra walked beside him, her silver skin shimmering softly under the flickering lights, drawing curious stares from passers-by. "This place gives me the creeps," Jace muttered, leaning closer to Lyra so she could hear him over the din. "How do you even know this rogue scientist won't turn us over to your people the moment we show up?" Lyra glanced at him, her luminous eyes steady despite the tension in her posture. "Dr. Kalen has no love for the Lumini Council," she said firmly. "He exposed their secrets once and they exiled him for it. If anyone can help us sever the thread, it's him." Jace raised an eyebrow but didn't argue further. They had little choice but to trust her judgment. Still, as they navigated through the labyrinthine corridors, dodging vendors shouting offers of dubious goods and avoiding groups of heavily armed mercenaries, he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was waiting just around the corner. Finally, they reached a grimy door marked with faded symbols that looked like some kind of warning. Lyra pressed a glowing palm against the panel beside it, and the door slid open with a low hiss. Inside was a dimly lit workshop cluttered with gadgets, wires, and half-finished contraptions. A figure hunched over a workbench, tinkering with what appeared to be a miniature fusion reactor. He turned slowly as they entered, revealing sharp features framed by wild gray hair and piercing blue eyes, magnified by thick goggles. "Lyra?" the man asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Is that really you?" "Kalen," Lyra replied, stepping forward cautiously. "I need your help." The scientist studied her for a moment before his gaze shifted to Jace, lingering on the human, with visible curiosity and perhaps suspicion. "You've brought company," he observed dryly. "A human, no less. This must be serious." "It is," Lyra admitted, gesturing toward Jace. "This is Jace Venn. He saved my life. And now, our fates are intertwined." Kalen's expression darkened slightly as he processed her words. "A soul thread," he murmured, almost to himself. Then, louder, "Do you realize what you've done, child? Bonding with a human? It's unprecedented. Dangerous." "We didn't have a choice," Lyra snapped, her composure cracking for the first time since arriving. "The enforcers are hunting us. We need to sever the bond now." Kalen sighed heavily, removing his goggles and setting them aside. He motioned for them to sit on a pair of stools near the workbench while he retrieved a small device resembling a scanner. "Severing a soul thread isn't as simple as cutting a wire," he explained, pacing back and forth. "It's not just physical, it's emotional, spiritual. Both parties will feel the effects, and if done improperly, it could leave permanent damage or worse." Jace frowned, shifting uncomfortably on his stool. "What exactly does worse mean here? Because I'm getting the sense this isn't going to be a walk in the park." "It means death," Kalen said bluntly, fixing Jace with a hard stare. "For one or both of you." The room fell silent except for the faint hum of machinery in the background. Jace swallowed hard, his mind racing. Death wasn't something he particularly wanted to gamble with, especially over a bond he hadn't even asked for. But then again, continuing down this path meant living with the constant threat of the enforcers, and whatever long-term consequences came with being tied to an alien species, so what's the alternative? Jace asked, finally breaking the silence. Just keep running forever? "There is another option," Kalen replied cryptically, his tone thoughtful. "Instead of severing the bond, you could embrace it fully. Strengthen it until it becomes unbreakable. Doing so would make you immune to detection by the enforcers. They rely on incomplete threads to track fugitives." "That sounds risky," Jace said slowly, glancing at Lyra. "And irreversible." "It is," Kalen confirmed. "But if you choose this path, you'll also gain access to abilities unique to bonded pairs. Enhanced senses, shared thoughts, even limited telepathy. It's a double-edged sword, though. Once the bond is complete, there's no going back." Jace rubbed the back of his neck, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of the decision. On one side was freedom, but at the cost of his humanity. On the other was safety, but with strings attached he wasn't sure he could handle. Either way, his life as he knew it was over. "What happens if we don't decide quickly?" he asked, looking between Kalen and Lyra. "The enforcers will find you," Kalen said simply. And when they do, neither of you will survive." Before Jace could respond, the sound of heavy boots echoed outside the workshop. Moments later, the door burst open, and 3 armored figures stormed in. Enforcers, their weapons drawn and aimed directly at them. Commander Vale stepped in behind them, his crescent moon mask gleaming ominously in the dim light. "You're persistent," Jace muttered under his breath, standing up slowly with his hands raised. Beside him, Lyra did the same, her expression resigned yet defiant. "Enough games," Vale growled, pointing his weapon at Lyra. "Return to the homeworld or perish here." Kalen moved swiftly, activating a hidden panel on his workbench. A blinding flash of light filled the room, disorienting the enforcers long enough for him to push Jace and Lyra toward a hidden exit at the back of the workshop. "Go," he shouted, throwing them a small metallic device. "That's a decoy signal. Use it to mask your energy signatures." Without hesitation, Jace grabbed Lyra's hand and bolted through the exit, emerging into a narrow service corridor. Behind them, shouts and blaster fire erupted as the enforcers recovered from the distraction. They ran as fast as they could, weaving through the crowded alleys of Nexus Prime, until the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Jace leaned against a wall, his chest heaving. "We can't keep running like this," he panted. "We need to make a choice now." Lyra nodded, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Whatever you decide, I will stand by you." Jace took a deep breath, weighing the options one last time. Freedom versus connection. Fear versus trust. Finally, he made his decision. "All right," he said, gripping the decoy device tightly. "Let's strengthen the bond. Whatever happens next, we face it together." Lyra smiled faintly, relief washing over her features. As they prepared to activate the device and begin the process, the threads of light binding them pulsed brighter than ever, signaling the start of a journey neither of them could have anticipated. The service corridor where Jace and Lyra had taken refuge was dimly lit, its walls lined with exposed pipes and flickering panels that cast long shadows across the floor. The distant hum of Nexus Prime's bustling activity provided a strange kind of white noise, masking their labored breathing as they tried to steady themselves after their narrow escape. Jace clutched the decoy device tightly in one hand, his knuckles white from the grip, while Lyra stood beside him, her silver skin shimmering faintly in the low light. "We don't have much time," she said softly, glancing over her shoulder toward the direction they'd come from. "The enforcers will find us again soon." Jace nodded, his mind racing as he processed the enormity of what they were about to do. Strengthening the bond, a decision he'd made in the heat of the moment, wasn't something he fully understood, let alone felt ready for. But it was their only chance. Taking a deep breath, he turned to face Lyra, his expression resolute. "All right," he said firmly. "Tell me how this works. What do I need to do?" Lyra hesitated, her luminous eyes searching his face as if trying to gauge whether he truly understood the gravity of the choice. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. "Strengthening the thread requires both of us to focus on the connection between us, to acknowledge it, accept it, and allow it to grow. It is not just physical, it is emotional, spiritual. You must trust me completely." "Trust you?" Jace echoed, raising an eyebrow. "You're asking a lot." "Here, Lyra, I know," she admitted quietly, her gaze unwavering. "But without trust, the bond cannot flourish. And without flourishing, we cannot survive." Jace sighed, running a hand through his hair. Trust wasn't something that came easily to him, not after years of living alone, keeping others at arm's length. But as he looked at Lyra now, standing before him with her ethereal beauty and quiet strength, he realized she hadn't given him any reason not to trust her. She'd been honest about the risks, even when it meant revealing painful truths about her people. She'd fought alongside him, risking her life to protect his. And somewhere along the way, she'd become someone he couldn't imagine leaving behind. "Okay," he said finally, meeting her gaze. "Let's do this." Lyra nodded, stepping closer until they were mere inches apart. She reached out tentatively, placing her hands lightly on his shoulders. Her touch sent a jolt through him, not painful but electrifying, like static electricity amplified 1,000-fold. He flinched slightly but didn't pull away, forcing himself to stay still as she closed her eyes and began to speak. Focus on the sensations you've felt since we met. The warmth, the tingling, the dreams. They are threads connecting us, weaving our lives together. Acknowledge them, accept them, let them guide you. Jace swallowed hard, closing his eyes as instructed. At first, all he could feel was the pounding of his heart and the adrenaline coursing through his veins. But then, slowly, other sensations began to surface. A gentle warmth spread through his chest, radiating outward like sunlight breaking through clouds. Faint whispers echoed in his mind, soft and indistinct, yet somehow familiar. Images flashed behind his eyelids, starlit skies, glowing veins of biometal, Lyra's luminous smile. It was overwhelming, almost too much to bear, but he forced himself to stay focused, to let the sensations wash over him. "It's working," Lyra murmured, her voice barely audible. "Keep going." As the moments passed, the connection grew stronger, more vivid. Jace felt as though he were being pulled into another world, one where boundaries dissolved and thoughts flowed freely between them. He caught glimpses of Lyra's memories, her childhood among the Lumini, the weight of their expectations, the pain of betrayal when she uncovered the truth about her people. In turn, she seemed to sense fragments of his own past, the loneliness of Krylos 7, the satisfaction of fixing broken things, the fear of losing control. For the first time in his life, Jace didn't feel alone. And yet, the realization brought with it a profound vulnerability. If the bond failed, if anything happened to Lyra, he knew it would destroy him. Suddenly, the warmth surged, becoming almost unbearable. Jace gasped, stumbling backward as the energy coursed through him like liquid fire. Lyra staggered too, her grip tightening on his shoulders as she struggled to maintain balance. Around them, the air shimmered and crackled, tiny arcs of light dancing between their bodies. "It's too much," Jace shouted, his voice strained. "I can't." "You must," Lyra insisted, her tone urgent. "Hold on, Jace. Don't let go." Summoning every ounce of willpower, Jace forced himself to stand firm, gritting his teeth against the intensity of the sensations. Slowly, the surge began to subside, replaced by a steady, pulsating rhythm that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. When he opened his eyes, the corridor around them appeared different, brighter, sharper, as though seen through a lens magnified by emotion. Lyra's presence filled his awareness, her thoughts brushing against his like whispers carried on the wind. "It's done," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief and exhaustion. "The bond is complete." Before either of them could process what had just happened, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor. Jace spun around, his body tense as three figures emerged from the shadows. Enforcers, their weapons drawn and aimed directly at them. "Enough," Commander Vale growled, stepping forward. His mask gleamed ominously in the dim light. "Your defiance ends here." Lyra stepped in front of Jace instinctively, shielding him with her body. "You'll have to kill us both," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear radiating off her. "The bond is unbreakable now." Vale paused, tilting his head slightly as if sensing the truth of her words. Then, without warning, he raised his weapon and fired. A bolt of energy streaked toward them, but instead of striking Lyra, it dissipated harmlessly inches from her skin, absorbed by an invisible barrier. "What?" Vale snarled, lowering his weapon in confusion. The other enforcers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence wavering. "The bond protects us," Lyra explained, turning to Jace with a small, triumphant smile. "They can't hurt us anymore." Realization dawned on Vale's face, followed swiftly by rage. "This changes nothing," he spat. "We'll hunt you to the edge of the galaxy if we have to." Jace clenched his fists, feeling a newfound strength surging within him. For the first time, he wasn't afraid, not of Vale, not of the enforcers, not even of the unknown future stretching ahead of them. Whatever challenges lay in store, he knew he wouldn't face them alone. "Bring it," he said defiantly, stepping forward to stand beside Lyra. "We're not running anymore." With that, the two of them turned and sprinted down the corridor, leaving the stunned enforcers behind. As they disappeared into the labyrinthine depths of Nexus Prime, the threads binding them pulsed brighter than ever, a testament to the sacrifices they had made and the bond that would carry them forward no matter what lay ahead. The chase through Nexus Prime felt endless, a blur of neon-lit corridors and shadowy alcoves as Jace and Lyra darted between crowds of aliens, their movements synchronized in ways that surprised even themselves. The bond they had forged pulsed steadily, guiding them like an invisible compass pointing toward safety, or perhaps something greater. Each step brought new sensations, heightened awareness of Lyra's presence beside him, flashes of shared insight into potential escape routes, and an uncanny ability to anticipate danger before it arrived. They finally reached the hangar where their ship was docked, its damaged biometal hull glowing faintly amidst the chaos of other vessels. As they climbed aboard, Jace couldn't help but marvel at how different everything felt now. His hands moved instinctively over the controls, responding to subtle cues from Lyra without needing words. It wasn't just mo-chi, mutual understanding. It was deeper, almost like the ship itself recognized their connection and responded accordingly. "Are you ready?" Lyra asked softly as she settled into the co-pilot's seat, her silver skin reflecting the soft glow of the console. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jace replied with a wry smile, gripping the controls tightly. With a roar of engines, the ship lifted off, weaving through the crowded airspace above Nexus Prime. Behind them, enforcer ships gave pursuit, their sleek forms cutting through the void like predators on the hunt. But this time, the odds were no longer stacked against them. As they broke free of the station's gravitational pull, Jace activated the decoy device Kalen had given them. A burst of false energy signatures erupted around them, creating a dazzling display of light and confusion that sent the enforcers scattering in all directions. For the first time since meeting Lyra, they found themselves truly alone, free if only for a moment, from the relentless pursuit of her people. But freedom came with questions. What would they do now? Where could they go? The galaxy was vast, but nowhere seemed safe. Not with the enforcers still hunting them and secrets about the Lumini threatening to unravel everything they thought they knew. "We need to expose the truth," Lyra said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a quiet determination that made Jace glance at her sharply. "What truth?" he asked cautiously. "The truth about my people," she explained, her luminous eyes filled with resolve. "Their methods, their lies, the cost of their so-called harmony. If others knew what they're capable of, maybe they'd stop trusting them. Maybe they'd fight back." Jace frowned, considering her words. Exposing the Lumine Council sounded noble in theory, but in practice it meant stepping directly into the crosshairs of one of the most powerful organizations in the galaxy. "And then what?" he pressed. "Even if we manage to spread the word, how long until they come after us again? Or worse, try to silence anyone who listens?" "I don't know," Lyra admitted quietly. "But staying silent isn't an option either. Not anymore." Her conviction struck a chord within him. Over the past days, Jace had gone from being a solitary mechanic on a desolate planet to someone entangled in intergalactic politics and cosmic mysteries. He hadn't asked for any of it, but he couldn't deny that his life had changed for the better because of Lyra. She had shown him courage, loyalty, and a purpose beyond fixing broken machines. Whatever lay ahead, he realized, he wanted to face it with her. "All right," he said finally, nodding firmly. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right. No half measures. We gather evidence, find allies, and hit them where it hurts." Lyra smiled faintly, relief washing over her features. "That